señalaron. Dijeron igualdad, pero esta vez me separaron. Dijeron mucho, pero no se olvidaron de callarse. Cuánto odio por mi piel sembraron. Dijeron historia y la tergiversaron. Dijeron guerra, muerte, odio y nos culparon. Enfermedades y epidemias nos contagiaron. Exterminación de mi fauna complace a tus mercados. Dijeron riqueza y todos se lo robaron. Oro, platino, diamante, a la fuerza se lo llevaron. Y la actualidad es tan triste que todo aquello que dijeron es lo mismo que hoy se dice más. ¿Quién dice? ¿Quién explota? ¿Quién se beneficia? El asesino, el mismo que da las noticias. Hay una cuenta fácil que siempre me da las grandes riquezas, de dónde vienen y hacia dónde van.
Independiente como los Mao Mao, concluyente como los Mao Mao,
como los Mao Mao,
como los Mao Mao. Somos resistentes como los Mao Mao, independiente como los Mao Mao, concluyente como los Mao Mao,
como los Mao Mao,
como los Mao Mao. Somos resistentes como los Mao Mao. Nati Dre es afroresistencia, cultura ancestral, afrodescendencia, solidaridad. Esa es la esencia, la diáspora africana eleva la conciencia, conciencia negra, universal, progresista y transcultural. Negros y mestizos revolucionando, pueblos caribeños y africanos en un solo bando. No más explotación, colonialismo interno, no más confusión, supremacía blanca en el Babilón. Soy rojo, negro y verde, afroliberación. Mientras más negro, más represión. Somos creadores, recupera tu visión. Mi visión es educar con amor, contra el silencio, vivo sin temor. Independiente como los Mao Mao, concluyente como los Mao Mao,
como los Mao Mao,
como los Mao Mao. Somos resistentes como los Mao Mao, independiente como los Mao Mao, concluyente como los Mao Mao,
como los Mao Mao,
como los Mao Mao. Somos resistentes como los Mao Mao.
Rise up.
Rise up, y'all. Good morning.
Good morning. Grand rising to the uprisers.
Yes. Jumbo, Alafia.
What else?
People. People. We are so delighted to be with y'all this morning, live and direct, here on the Rise Up International Morning Show. Natasha, how are you feeling today?
I'm feeling good. I'm feeling a little tired, but I'm feeling a little good at the same time and a little energized at the same time. So it's a little mix of everything. Maybe you know how when you I guess when you become overly tired, or maybe you then you start feeling like you have energy or something. I think that's probably what it is with me.
Oh yeah, it's definitely like that delirium that sets in when you have exhausted yourself. But all of a sudden, you just get this burst, and it's like, I'm still going though.
And you're feeling good. When a kid is on a sugar high or something before they crash out.
Exactly. Really, that is what it is. And I think that the way the dopamine in our body works is that we definitely get bursts of energy for what we need. And there are times it's almost like the way people talk about muscle failure, like get beyond muscle failure. And once you're beyond muscle failure, you can do so much more. I'm still waiting on that to happen for me.
Listen, I was telling a friend of mine the other day, I was just like, man, you know how people say working out is their mental health.
Like, oh yeah.
If they work out, they, their days wouldn't be the same, like their life wouldn't be the same. I'm like, I wish that were me. Like I want working out to be something that,
Absolutely.
I cannot live without. It's something I cannot not do.
No, I'm with you right there. I do want that to be me. And very honestly, a couple of years ago, it wasn't that I felt like I needed it for mental health. It was just that I was very committed to being active because I did not want to be sedentary. I wanted to make sure that I was healthy. And also, like, let's be for real about it. We have to be in decent physical shape because we don't know what we're going to encounter. Like, I need to be able to run. I need to be able to still climb up a fence and jump over some stuff. Mm-hmm. I got to be able to throw.
Agility's got to be there.
Throw a few good punches, be kind of flexible. We never know. what might happen. And I know as a mother, for me, there has always been this concern about being able to protect my children, to defend my children, to just respond in a crisis physically if need be. So there was a big concern, and I do still have that concern. Unfortunately, I became overwhelmed with life, with movement, with responsibilities, and just allowed myself to fall off of the track of consistency with working out. But I am definitely making a commitment to circle back and get back onto that track because it is important. And no, I don't necessarily want to be one of those people who are like, oh my gosh, I can't live if I don't work out. I don't want to be that person that I can't live without anything other than my family, but I definitely do want to make sure that I have a healthy appetite for physical activity, for exercise, because I want to live, and I want to live well. I don't want to be saddled down with a bunch of health issues that preclude me from doing things simply because I decided that I was too tired to move.
Exactly. No, I'm with you the same. I mean, I used to be on it too. I mean, even in the summertime, I'm more on it. Like spring, summer, fall, like winter is just really not conducive to the kind of working out that I prefer. I definitely like being outside and working out in that kind of way, like physical activities as opposed to like going to the gym.
Yes. Absolutely, because the gym is weird. Half the people who are there are not really there to work out. A lot of people are already just in shape and wearing their tight clothes to attract someone of the opposite sex, same sex, whatever. And also the amount of people who just want to show off. And I think I know that I have gotten discouraged in a gym by the amount of people who are taking out their phones to record, because I'm sorry, I'm not there for that.
Mm-hmm.
That's what you're doing, then that's what you do. But I'm definitely a person that does better just outside. Just, even downstairs in my den in the house, I do better than the gym. I tried it for a while because I thought that it would be good for me to get out of the house because I was working remotely. So in the house most of the time. And I'm like, yeah, let me just get out. But no, nothing beats just getting outside. Nothing beats getting outside. And plus, I'm not consistent enough going to a gym that it would justify me paying money every month for a membership, and I'm cheap. So
and me too. I am cheap. I am the queen of getting a sale. I love a deal.
Absolutely.
And if I feel like, okay, this ain't it, then I'm gonna keep my money where it is. And I think that, even like in times like now and just as a people, we should always be thinking too, like when we're talking about being cheap and keeping our money, where we need it and not where we don't need it is important, because especially like when we think about, the current government and all of the layoffs that's happening and people not really being sure if they're next or what's coming next.
Ooh, my goodness.
So, and eggs being, I guess, a lot of money. I was
my aunt did send me to the store a few days ago to buy eggs. And I will say that the eggs in Kroger in Atlanta were $7.49 for only a dozen.
Wow. I mean, compared
for the first time, those were the white eggs, and they were more expensive than the cage-free eggs. I couldn't believe it.
That's interesting.
Extremely. Cage-free eggs were only $4.99. And those white eggs were $7.49 for a dozen.
That's
interesting. Extremely interesting. Extremely interesting. This is an extremely effective impetus for me to go pescatarian.
I was thinking that yesterday. I mean, I'm vegan, and I've been vegan for, I don't know, many years. Like I haven't eaten meat in, it has to be at least 20 years now.
Wow.
And I was talking to a friend of mine yesterday, and she eats eggs and stuff, and she was just like, yeah, she's not doing it, because she went to the store recently, to one store, they were $10.99, and then she ended up going to another store, they were $14.99.
Ooh.
like, for some eggs? Yeah. What is this? Yeah, that's crazy.
No way in the world. No way in the world.
Yeah,
I
she said, "I'm
mean,
gonna take a break because this ain't on."
absolutely. I've been hearing things about the state of chicken anyway. Not that chickens are not just nasty anyway, but it's a staple for many of us. I am a person who admittedly loves a good hot wing. Like, I love hot wings, but one thing that I started to notice a while ago was that sometimes after I eat chicken, I don't feel so good. I start
Mm.
to get like a little bit queasy and almost like, I don't know if it's the thought that I'm really eating a chicken because things are different for me as I get older or what it is, but yeah, chicken doesn't sit right with me anymore. And also, there are just a lot of rumblings about viral and bacterial issues with chicken, that the chicken that we're getting in stores are not even pasteurized to the point that we need to be able to eat them safely. So, yeah. And if you hear that there's something wrong with the chicken, there's got to be something wrong with the eggs because the eggs are coming from the chickens.
Yeah.
So, yeah, this is just a good time for us to really reconsider the things that we want. And it's something that I've talked about with my family at different times regarding our diet and how we eat and what we eat. And many of us were already coming to the point of like, let's add chicken to that list too. A lot of people already don't eat beef or pork, but yeah, let's go ahead and add chicken to that list. I don't know that I'm ready to be completely vegan yet because I do still love fish, but we know that there are just a lot of our fish is being grown in a lab too. Like, it's
Yeah.
just
I mean,
Mhm.
like, they are really, I mean, what they've done with the food system, and the food ways is
Yes,
like, it's in the same way that we think about colonization and
yes,
what they did done to the people and what they did to the people and
yes.
in the land, that they've done the same thing to the food as well.
Hmm.
Through what they've done with the land and as well as the oceans,
Exactly.
the lakes and the rivers. I mean, they've just really wreaked havoc on the way in which people live and can access, and the way that we can grow and learn from our environments, because they created these very stale, concrete environments in terms of like even the trees that they allow to be planted, and um
Yes.
how much green space they're leaving, quote unquote, leaving open, like
Oh
um
yeah.
for in terms of what they are actually taking down, which is most of green spaces in general. And so, like, people not having connections to the food that they eat, not being able to touch the soil.
Yes.
You know,
Yes.
even I was thinking about recently the other day, and then we can move on to stories. Uh, um, people wearing sneakers, and how like sneakers came about, like for us
Yes.
and for those generations that came into life just knowing like sneakers just exist, like they feel like they've always existed, but they haven't, and that actually wearing sneakers is not even really good for you. um and the work walking on the concrete, and all of the different things.
Hmm.
So it's just like there's just so many ways in which they've just messed with the way that we're able to live optimal lives, and a lot of those things we don't even recognize because it just seems so normal to us. I'll be on a panel talking about food and land, and in our health as Black people, and well, yeah, later today actually.
Oh wow. Is this going to be virtual? Is this something that people can tune into?
Yeah, it's gonna be virtual. If I think I have the flyer on my computer that I can share people. I do. I know it says online on the flyer, but I'm like, there's no link here. But I'll have to ask the organizer, like, okay, where's the, or maybe I don't know. It says online, so I'm like, okay, online. Where's that gonna be? What does that
Right.
mean?
Right. No, it's definitely good for people to tune in so that they can understand
But yeah,
exactly the things that we're talking about when we talk about what it means for us to be self-determined, and we talk about food sustainability and, like the flyer said, reclaiming our land, taking back what was taken from us and utilizing the bit of space that we do have. We're living in a time where there are too many local governments that are trying to outlaw a small garden in your front yard.
exactly.
Can you imagine?
Like, oh no, now you can't use your lawn because you're growing food. No, you can't. It's the same thing with like, oh, you can't collect rainwater.
That's right, which is crazy because who are you to tell me that I cannot collect rainwater? You don't own the rain. You do
Crazy.
not own the rain. And the fact that I know that when we're talking, and when I say we, not just us specifically, but people in movement, people as a whole, when people are talking, particularly these days, about being not like no longer being dependent on the government for things and wanting to make ways for themselves, our
Mhm.
interdependence on each other rather than on government entities. When we begin to talk about growing our own food and doing things for ourselves, these people are listening. They are
Yep. I
definitely
think
listening. So when they hear us, it's like, oh, this is the trend now. This is the wave. More and more people are waking up to the fact that they can do small things right at home that will cause them not to have to keep going to the grocery store for things. All right, we got to thwart this somehow.
exactly. We got to figure out exactly how to make sure that they can still stay dependent on us while we do everything that we can to destabilize whatever is going on. Um,
Mm-hmm.
their communities, any kind of connections or anything that they have, any kind of insights that they're able to have
Mm-hmm.
from doing this. And so, it's just, we always got to keep our eyes open and our, minds sharp to really make sure that as much as that they're studying us, that we're also studying them and that we're making sure that
Absolutely.
that we
Absolutely.
yep, that we're getting what we need and that we're putting ourselves in a position to fight back
Yes.
because they
And
fight
that is it.
whether we like it or not, whether we want to see it or not, whether we want to notice it or not.
Yes. They are always. And we don't do ourselves any favors by sticking our heads into the sand. We can't bury our heads in the sand and pretend like it's not happening. It is happening.
Yep. And that's why here on the Rise Up Morning Show, you get all the latest news about what is happening. And so we have a guest coming on later, but before we get to our guest, we wanted to talk a little bit about some of the stuff that's going on so that, we make sure that you're getting the information that allows you to be in the know and be able to do whatever and move however you need to move because So
Right.
there was a story on South Africa, and the commercial impetus behind like Trump's targeting of South Africa. And so people in general recently have been privy to how Trump is saying like, oh yeah, all of you white, because I'm not even gonna call them Afrikaners. I'm not gonna call
Right.
no all the people who all you white colonizers who still have the land in Africa
Yes.
over here, we're gonna treat you as refugees, and we're gonna make sure that you can come here and we'll give you pretty much we'll lay out the red carpet for you.
Yes.
White supremacists, we stick together. And so in that whole thing along, him saying that because of the fact that, there's this, because they're pushing for land reform, but which we know this has been something that's been going on occupied Azania for many, many years, that
Yes.
it's not even where it needs to be in terms of, actual land redistribution and land back. Really, that's what it's
Yes.
land back in the way that it needs to be. And so this story talks about, thinking a little deeper in terms of what the impetus is behind this whole, thing with these white people from these white colonists from South Africa, and as well as what may be behind what else lies behind this wanting to aid these white South Africans, and also
Yes.
placing this What did he? Stopping the aid that South Africa was getting. So I'll share my screen really quickly, and I'll just quickly go through the video. I mean the story, and then here we go. So it talks about how the United States immediately cut all aid to the country and granted refugee status to white citizens of Afrikaner descent. So this was ostensibly done because South Africa had enacted legislation, principally the Expropriation Without Compensation Act, which allegedly discriminates against Afrikaner South Africans and had harmed U.S. interests by taking ally Israel to the International Court of Justice and genocide charges against the Palestinian people, which we know South Africa did. And then specifically, they focus on the possibility, but this article is focusing on the possibility that U.S. commercial interests in South Africa's nuclear industry and the access to this could afford Africa's potential lucrative nuclear energy market in the future underlies this decision, that it's not just, they're trying to say that they're doing this because South Africa brought them to brought charges up against them for against their ally Israel for genocide, and that this whole law that is happening in Africa is the reason why. But no, that there is actually a more long-term idea and impetus for this, and it's more of a long-term economic beneficial impetus. And we know that we can never just take things as we see them in the media. So and especially at a time like this, there's so much, we're such in a chaotic time, not only because obviously of the way in which the country's going since January 20th, but I mean, it's been kind of chaotic, but it's gotten very more chaotic since the January 20th, but also in terms of white hegemony and the threat to white hegemony globally, and how they've been scrambling to make sure, or to try to make sure, that they maintain their foothold of white supremacy and hegemony worldwide. With the rise of China and with, Africa continuing to grow, they're like, okay, how do we make sure we maintain our position? And we know that when especially whether it's a bully or a real cowards, as we know that the people who do the kind of stuff that Europeans have done in terms of colonialism, imperialism, those are real cowards at the end of the day. And that we know that those, when their backs are up against the wall, that they will do anything.
Absolutely, they will.
To the last, so, and I think that's exactly what we're seeing here. And it says that the chief of these is the anticipation that the long-promised nuclear renaissance may finally be getting underway, driven by the need for countries to reduce their carbon emissions and the transitioning their economies away from dependence on fossil fuels for their energy needs. African countries, with their younger growing populations, lower energy output, and weak economies in particular, appear to have embraced this solution to reducing their carbon footprint, judging at least by the number of African countries that have either embarked upon nuclear programs recently, like Egypt. And so it says, subsequently, the African nuclear energy market has become an arena for increased competition and contestation for influence at a time of heightened geopolitical tensions. And so the U.S. would be able to thwart essentially Russian and Chinese nuclear ambitions and gain an advantage over its great power rivals in Africa's nascent nuclear energy market by securing great access to BRICS member South Africa's nuclear energy sector, given South Africa's status as a uranium producing country with a well-established nuclear industry that has a significant pool of nuclear expertise and skills. So to close out, it goes on to say further, even if the South African government did decide to go ahead and expand nuclear power capacity, Indications are that BRICS ally Russia has always been the front runner to secure any nuclear deal with South Africa, rather than the large-scale power plants, which have traditionally been the focus of nuclear build-outs. The U.S. has been pushing the design and development of small modular reactors, SMRs. Importantly, since they are smaller than traditional nuclear power stations in terms of output capacity and estimated to cost substantially less, public entities are not the only potential buyers of these reactors. And it says that, incidentally, these tech moguls, like Trump's inner circle, as it mentions here in the article, like the Elon Musk, who's, the son of a white colonizer, right? Descendant of a white colonizer as well. Incidentally, these tech moguls have themselves invested heavily in the development of advanced SMRs to meet the energy needs of the energy-hungry data centers on which the artificial intelligence, the AI industry, is reliant. Incidentally, they have already raised significant amounts of capital to build nuclear power stations based on SMR designs. Access to South Africa's nuclear industry would enable them to build out large energy infrastructure needed to run their database co-effectively, which enabling them to test and hone their preferred models, independent electricity production before replacing it elsewhere. And so in a further twist, Afro-Forum, the group that has been thrust into the global spotlight because of its central role in the saga following the lobbying on behalf of Afrikaners in the U.S., and its various partners and organizations here, with their South African Agri Initiative, are prominent supporters of nuclear power and have long been proponents of SMR design based on South Africa's abandoned pebble bed modular reactor design. This group has also partnered with U.S.-based organizations to have deep South African links to raise funds in the U.S. for the building and operation of SMRs in South Africa. So that is just to show you.
That's a lot. And I think people who might be saying, well, what does nuclear energy in South Africa have to do with us? Everything. Everything. Wherever you live in these so-called United States, I'm sure that there are conversations where you live about data centers. We just talked about small nuclear reactors, small modular reactors, which are a smaller nuclear reactor. That's a term that I hear a lot in my working as an environmental organizer. And nuclear energy is one of the things that energy companies will rely on when they talk about clean energy promises, the goals of moving from fossil fuels to clean energy. They will immediately fall back on nuclear energy. And just for the record, nuclear energy is not clean energy either. It is a bit better than fossil fuels. However, data centers are all the rage right now. And I believe that in a lot of state legislatures right now, there are state representatives who are considering the issues of data centers. I know that here in Georgia, this is the time that our power monopoly, Georgia Power, which is owned by Southern Company, is introducing their integrated resource plan, which talks about how they intend to provide energy for the state of Georgia. Small modular reactors are always in that conversation because Georgia Power, whenever they are pressed on the use of fossil fuels, will fall back on nuclear energy. I don't know if people understand that there is a nuclear power plant in Georgia called Plant Vogtle. Plant Vogtle just had an extension a couple years ago for 2 more units, Vogtle 2 and 3, or 3 and 4. That extension and Plant Vogtle altogether, that is the most expensive nuclear power plant to be built in the country to date. I don't know if people understand what that means, but the charges for that build out get passed right off to us, to the customers. When you live in a place and you don't have a choice about who your power comes from, then the things that these power companies are allowed to do and the charges they're allowed to levy and then pass off to the ratepayers are extremely important. Georgia Power is able to transfer 100% of transmission costs of energy to the customer. So if Georgia Power was involved in any type of dealings with South African nuclear power plants and using small modular reactors, whatever things that are going on, Georgia Power could calculate the cost of transmitting nuclear energy, even what it takes to get the materials from South Africa to Georgia. That could be calculated into transmission costs, and we would be paying that. And I think people really have to understand exactly how all of this stuff works together. Because one thing that I did notice is that Georgia Power here in the state of Georgia, they have more lobbyists in our state capital than we have state senators. There are not any more any other companies who have as many lobbyists within our state capital as Georgia Power. Our Public Service Commission here pretty much kowtows to Georgia Power. Whatever it is that Georgia Power wants, they get. So they have released this integrated resource plan. They've introduced this. And for all of the things that Georgia Power was supposed to be doing, things like retiring coal-powered plants, they were supposed to do that by 2028. Now that the new administration has come in and a lot of the guardrails are off, Georgia Power has decided we don't want to retire any fossil fuel plants. We're still going to use coal because we need it. We want it. Cheapest thing for us. So we're not going to retire anything. And we're asking for all of those plants to have their lives extended into 2035 and beyond. So when you think about what this means for us, it has a lot of implications for the United States. We already know what the fossil fuel industry means to this country. The fact that Greenpeace is being sued right now for their activism at Standing Rock against the Dakota Access Pipeline. The fact that other environmental justice organizations have their names being thrown around as terrorists and antagonists simply because they are talking about the detriment to Black people of certain developments that are allowed. This stuff is not coincidence. So I think that people really should always keep an eye on what's going on, whether it is in South Africa, whether it is the fact that the U.S. continues to keep its hand on both sides of certain conflicts. They do that a lot. We will see that the U.S. government will claim to come to the aid of a country that is in peril, but then you'll find out that the U.S. was also arming the people who were terrorizing that same country. This has been happening in time immemorial here in the United States with U.S. forces, and particularly with the government, because the U.S. is always going to think about the bottom line, the dollars, what's coming in, how is it that we are growing this economy? How can we keep benefiting oligarchs like Elon Musk? Because those same oligarchs will turn around and continue to pad the pockets of those who make the laws under which we abide.
Yep, absolutely. And this story also makes me think about the recent South Africa election outcomes and how the ANC lost, and they had to come into they created this coalition with the whites.
Yes,
the white colonists, the descendants of the white colonists. Some of them are probably not descendants; they're probably the originals.
Yes.
And this guy, so we did a show on We Charge Colonialism, talking about the recent elections in occupied Tanzania, and as well as I forget the other country. I don't think it was I think the other country was supposed to be Togo. But also like all of these elections that happened last year, and how what their outcomes and impacts mean. And one of the things that and I would invite people to go and check that show out for sure, because I think it's very informative, because we had a brother on there from South Africa, from occupied Tanzania, and he was talking about how there's this guy, this white colonist who also, you know, the same likes as Elon Musk, called Robert Hassoff, who moved back to South Africa. So he had moved out for a while, but then in anticipation ahead of the election, he moved back, but he moved back to type of to kind of like set up the mechanisms for controlling the elections, and that he had this whole campaign against you know, the ANC, and quote unquote saying save South Africa from the ANC because it's corrupt, and also pushing this whole anti-immigrants narrative that, you know, in South Africa as well. And that it's also been said a lot, and if you look into if you know, you research more on this guy, that one, he's, you know, he's got that, you know, colonial, you know, white colonial money, and that also too, he's been operating behind the scenes really to be a puppeteer for the outcome of this election. And so that when we see the outcome of the election in South Africa, we should also be looking not particularly only to what the outcomes were, but to this guy who did a lot of work around propaganda and puppeteering, so that you can have the kind of outcome that you did. Because I think for everyone, whether, you know, whatever your thoughts were about South Africa, the ANC not being able to like have the points that it does, and it was like a major thing. It was because for so long they held that position, but that also not one black party was able, you know, like the black parties weren't able to come together and, you know, do that. Like and so this also makes me think about what his connection and the results of the South African election in this new coalition of the whites in South Africa really being put into position of into a position where the blacks, the actual African South Africans, or, you know, Azanians, really have to be in this coalition with these people. And what does that mean for the power dynamic that is going to exist and also exists? Because we already know the power dynamic, even when you had you know, an African president in there, was still on, because you could see it within the country, you could see it within the society. And so I think that's something too to look at and see, like, how is white supremacy moving globally in ways that we don't even see right away? And so I think that's really something to keep an eye out on in terms of this story.
Absolutely. Absolutely. People have to look beyond their backyards, because there is always a connection.
Always. Exactly. Always. And, you know, people are lining up chess pieces.
Yes.
You got to realize, you know, they playing chess. You got to see them.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
So we're going to jump to a back power break because we have our guests coming on. And, you know, we don't want to keep our guests waiting. So we're going to jump to a back power break. And after this, come right back.
But being friendly and being a friend, I think, are two different things. I think there are many whites who act friendly toward Negroes. A fox acts friendly toward the lamb. And usually the fox is the one who ends up with the lamb chop on his plate. The wolf doesn't act friendly, and therefore the wolf has more difficulty in getting the lamb chop in his plate.
I'd like to point out, though, that...
I say that because it is usually if you study the structure of the Negro community, economically, politically, civically, psychologically, and otherwise, it's controlled by the white liberal, who usually poses as the friend of the Negro, who actually differs from the white conservative in the same way that the fox differs from the wolf. Their appetite is the same. Their motives are the same. It's only their mannerisms and methods that differ.
I would agree that no doubt there have been a large number of whites who have posed as liberals and as friends of the Negro, and who have time and again betrayed the Negro. On the other hand, I think one could point to a large number of whites who have struggled for civil rights, for equality, and have got little or nothing out of it, other than quite a few bruises.
Give me an example.
Well, the large number of white students who have gone into the South, for example, working for SNCC and other organizations.
Not working for SNCC or other organizations, but working for the white political machines who benefit by the voting efforts of Negroes.
Okay. I'll be more specific. I would cite Herbert Hill, for example, as a kind of person who has championed Negro job rights, for example, in New York City and elsewhere. He has fought the political machine.
First time I met Herbert Hill personally was when they were picketing to stop the working on the Harlem Hospital in Harlem. Negroes for 10 years had to fight the city to get an annex built on the Harlem Hospital. Because in Harlem we need a hospital more so than anything else. Our people are sick. Plus we do a lot of cutting and shooting of each other, though we profess to be nonviolent. And Herbert Hill brought his forces out and stopped the working on that site. This is the first time I ever saw him. Then when work was brought to a halt on a hospital in Harlem, the same Negroes tried to stop the work at the Downstate Medical Center in Brooklyn, which is predominantly white. They were out there for 3 months during the summer. Couldn't stop anything. And I never saw Herbert Hill out there one time. Now, whenever it takes a stoppage of something that's going to affect the white man, you find the white liberal absent. But when it involves something that primarily will affect the best interests of black people, and black people only, then that white liberal is present. Herbert Hill is the labor secretary for the NAACP. Mm-hmm. And if he was interested in black people, he would prepare a black man with the type of knowledge and understanding of the labor troubles involving black people that would enable a black man to sit in the same position as Secretary of Labor or Labor Secretary in the NAACP. I'm suspicious of whites who join Negroes and always have to be in the lead, who always have to be the head, who always have to be at the top in Negro organizations. Those whites who really have the interest of blacks at heart, let them give some advice to some Negroes and stand on the sideline. But don't join the organization and then get at the head of it and pose as a friend of Negroes.
Well, I would defend his sincerity and his commitment. And more than that, I would say that just because a person is a Negro or a black American does not mean he's going to struggle for Negro rights or for jobs for Negroes or anything else. I think that today you could point to a large number of Negro leaders who have consistently betrayed Negroes in a whole host of areas.
They aren't really Negro leaders. These are puppets that have been put in front of the Negro community by white liberals. These are parrots that have been put in front of the Negro community by white liberals. You can't name me a Negro leader who has been betrayed Negroes, who has not been endorsed, sanctioned, subsidized, and supported by the white liberals.
Minister Malcolm, I'd like to...
Well, I could cite one example would be Congressman Dawson, for example, in Chicago. In Chicago, a large number of liberals located in the Hyde Park district have consistently fought Dawson and his betrayals of the Negro, and they've also fought some of the people who represent Dawson on the Chicago City Council.
The only Negro I know who is constantly fought, only Negro politician that I know who is constantly fought by white liberals is Adam Clayton Powell. Mm-hmm. And they call him a racist because he speaks so bluntly on the race issue. But I'm not, as I said, not too familiar with Dawson and his work.
Yeah, that's right. You know, powerful words from and insightful words from Malcolm, as always, because we know, like he said, that these conservatives and liberals are all one and the same, and
Mhm.
they will play in your face and pretend, just like we were, talking about Donald Trump, who some black people, out of their minds voted for and think, he's for you and is doing this. I mean, even the rest of these people out here also, like the Latinos who also voted for him and, thought like, thinking he's really going to do something for them. Like, again, this way of kind of pretending, and he's not even a liberal in that sense, right? He's just taking up some of the tactics that he's seen has worked, right? To do that things that the Europeans do, the way that they, used it during colonization to, have two faces, to show you two faces at the same time.
Absolutely. Two sides of the same coin.
And that's it. But we're going to talk a little bit more about Malcolm X and what's coming up and what's happening with Baba Zayid, who's here with us today. Zayid Muhammad, who is a jazz poet, community-based actor, organizer, human rights activist, member of the Malcolm X Commemoration Committee, which was founded by the comrades of Malcolm X, the late Herman Ferguson and Yuri Kuchiyama, as well as being part of the Newark Anti-Violence Coalition and so much more. So we're gonna have Baba Zayid come on and tell the people a little bit more about himself. So thanks for being up here early in the morning, up with us early, rising up early with the Rise Up Morning Show.
So y'all jack slapping conservatives and liberals, huh?
Good morning, Baba. How are you?
Texas and Malcolm is the answer. All power to the people. Free the land.
Free the land.
To all my Muslims out there. Lafayette to all of my traditionalists. Right? All right. How we going in, daughters? Talk to me. What we doing?
Well, we got the rest of the, we got the rest of the hour.
Huh?
I said we have the
whole hour.
My God. The rest of the 8 o'clock hour. So you be good to go. But tell the people a little bit more about people who don't, who are watching our show, who don't really aren't as familiar with you. A little bit about yourself.
First, he's crazy as hell. He's hell about freedom, justice, and equality. Been crazy all his life, like most of our people have been made crazy by white supremacy in the wilderness of North America. Let me thank both of you for having me on. Kiana, it's very good to see you, daughter. Kiana's from up my way.
You too.
In a way that'll help answer your first question. And I rarely talk about me directly. I just try and do the work. First, ancestrally, I want to really lift up my MXCC ancestors. Herman Ferguson. You mentioned Yuri Kuchiyama. Should mention Gene Reynolds, Butch Gladstone, Earl Grant, right? Most recently, Joan Gibbs, Ialua Ferguson, right? And so many others. And most of them were actually in the Nation with Malcolm, Muslim Mosque Incorporated with Malcolm, and most especially the Organization of Afro-American Unity with Malcolm. And when Herman, who was one of the few of that particular grouping who was in the OAU, actually tried to move forward in picking up Malcolm's line with work that he was doing that made him a very serious target for COINTELPRO, the COINTELPRO activity that took a lot of our freedom fighters out, that took a lot of our freedom fighters out of circulation and into captivity, and that ultimately had him go into exile for better than 20 years in Guyana, and daring to come back as age was advancing upon him in his late 60s to attempt to clear his name. Baba Herman himself had to also join the ranks of our political prisoners. But as soon as he was released, Baba Herman pulled together some of his comrades and some of us who were Malcolmites. Right, I have been doing work around Malcolm's legacy for decades, even before that. I mean, even I was still quite young then, meaning somewhere close to where y'all at now, both in New York and in New Jersey. I had a project called the Malcolm X Ancestral Memory Project that I ran called Frontline Artists back in the 90s, and that was through that project that I ultimately was tasked in 1988 with doing the first book party for none other than Assata Shakur in the country in Newark, New Jersey, to the chagrin of the New Jersey State Police. But to the heart of the question, my journey towards Malcolm is one that speaks to the most base dimension of his revolutionary legacy, the dimension of personal transformation. Back on the third Friday of 1977, long before y'all even thought of, right? Uh, I stole the autobiography of Malcolm X in a drug transaction. Transaction in which I was the dealer. I was not Zayid Muhammad back then. I was out of my mind, and I had a number of aliases, and was just on my way either to death or to prison. Really, things were really tight for me on the street at that point. But I don't know what compelled me that evening to steal the autobiography of Malcolm X that evening, but I thank the God of our ancestors that I did, because it literally saved me from what was looming on the streets that meant me no goodwill whatsoever. So I would say that Malcolm saved me from going to prison or dying a dumb death, as some of us do in the streets. Within a month, I would actually take Shahada, or the declaration of faith that one takes to become a Muslim. And I try to be a Muslim like Malcolm X, and I'm still trying to figure that out in my advanced age, right? Because Malcolm really showed those of us, in terms of Black men in this country, how to walk tall with Islam without depending on anybody. I want y'all to understand what I'm saying now, because I'm talking about faith in a revolutionary way, not depending on any Arabs, not depending on any outside money, not depending on anybody else's, line or what is the correct Islam and none of that. Nah, we walk on the strength of our own ancestors and our own struggle and our own tradition, and stand up in an erect and direct way, in our own way. Nobody did that for us like Malcolm. Malcolm was in many respects a kind of, I'm trying to be guarded about this, because Muslims actually stay away from me for a number of reasons, and this is one. Was kind of a Prophet Muhammad for us. Now, what do I mean? Prophet Muhammad to Muslims, in the traditional sense of Islam, is considered our ultimate example of how to behave and how to live the life of a Muslim. Now, Prophet Muhammad was go back in the 600s, right?
Oh, he's frozen a little bit. We gonna ask our other co-host to mute. Welcome, brother Kalanji, with you with all the noise.
Kalanji's supposed to be the expert on this medium. This is his baby, right? Anyway, Malcolm was our example. More than any other person in this tradition, in this space, in this realm of history, he was our example. He was a very clear example on how to walk that walk. Now, as I would progress in my life, and I would join the Black student movement, ultimately find myself in Rutgers, Newark, surrounded by a lot of cubs of Amiri Baraka.
Mm-hmm.
And that would lead to some an appreciation for the political and cultural legacy of Malcolm X, right? And that would, and the other things that I already mentioned earlier would ultimately come from me as a consequence of the total embrace of Malcolm, the Malcolm the Faith example, Malcolm the dyed-in-the-wool champion of Black revolution and Pan-Africanism that he ultimately was and became. When we were
Little lag there.
Just a little bit. And hopefully.
There we go. I think we're getting them back.
You got a connection issue?
Yes.
You okay?
You back now. Yeah, you good.
That might have been on my end. Ialua asked me to come to that first meeting after doing a session at the Harlem State Office building back in 1980 something for Herman, right? And when Herman we would start having meetings at the Center for Constitutional Rights by virtue of one Joan Gibbs, who was working at the Center for Constitutional Rights, and that's where the birth of the embryonic development of the Malcolm X Commemoration Committee would take place. I'm the last surviving member of the original member of the organization, and most recently I've been tasked with the leadership of the organization because of that, because other folks have moved on, and some folks have moved ancestrally on, so the
That internet, you know.
It happens. It happens. It is spotty.
That's it.
Can y'all hear me now?
You back.
Yes.
Okay, all
You
right.
weren't gone for too long.
Yeah, all right. But I asked folks to follow the organization on Facebook, Malcolm X Commemoration Committee on Facebook. We have a hot Facebook page, a very international Facebook page, a very young Facebook page. We get traffic from all over the Black world. You know, we're getting a lot of traffic recently from Latin America and Europe that I'm very excited about. And then we can talk about what that means in terms of Malcolm's identification of how to organize our people in all of those spaces in the progression of the conversation.
Absolutely.
So, yeah, so I'll start there because I can go on.
You on the Rise of International Morning Show. So this is, we talk about internationalism, right? And and I know that and you could, in talking about this, add more to what you were saying about the way in which the organization is getting this kind of global network connection in the work that Malcolm did as an internationalist, a Pan-African internationalist. And so I know that for the centennial, as we've, talked about this year, that, it's a centennial of Malcolm X, as well as Patrice Lumumba, Frantz Fanon. And so in the fact that it's say it again.
Medgar Evers also.
And Medgar Evers, yes. I knew I was forgetting someone. And so in terms of thinking about how people are commemorating him and what people should be doing during this centennial, what does this mean to have this type of year of energy, and what the organization has planned? Because we really like to let people know what's happening in the streets. And so let people know how people are commemorating Malcolm X in the streets.
Well, first,
while he's a little frozen, I'm gonna show you this flyer for an event that's happening tomorrow, February 21st, where that will be part of the years-long commemoration efforts around Malcolm X. So I was just showing this flyer. I know that you're also the MXCC is also part of doing this event as well.
Yeah. Can y'all hear me now?
Yeah, you're good to go.
I don't know why that keeps doing that. I apologize for that. Come back to the question.
Oh yeah, I was saying that, like, let the people know what is being done. Like, what is MXCC doing in terms of the centennial for Malcolm? And you can even add on to like anything that has to do like with internationalism, as you were talking about before.
First and foremost, we're encouraging folks who are serious about Malcolm's legacy to do stuff all year for the centennial. This is a centennial year, not just a centennial day. This is an opportunity to lift up Malcolm in a big way all over the world. And it would ignite, I would dare say, ignite and inspire the kind of resistance that we need to the advance of the right wing that marks this hour, right? I've been telling folks, and I'm trying to politicize another space that Malcolm needs to be lifted back up, and that's the space of community-based violence intervention. It's a space that I work in Newark, New Jersey. Malcolm was the father of what we call credible messengers. These spaces who were funded by compromised city governments and funded by philanthropic sources and whatnot, and we're about to get smacked by this advance of the right wing and a shortcomings of those resources, right? I said they let them come with the politics of reaction. We come with the politics of revolution. Let them come with Trump. We come back with Malcolm and all that Malcolm has taught us. And there's two basic things that just need to be real clear about this moment. Number one, we need to sometimes retreat into our ranks for
Man, I really wanted to hear the end of that sentence.
Oh, we're going to get it. We are definitely going to get it. We need to sometimes retreat into our ranks for...
Yeah.
Into our ranks for what?
For redevelopment, right? And base building.
That's right.
Building, institution building, independent of any outside sources.
100%.
That's right.
In our nationalist tradition.
Say it
right?
again.
Yeah, I mean, and this is something that we struggle with. We have the Black radical tradition that don't want nothing to do with nationalism, and we got the Black radical tradition that is nationalist, right? Self-determination don't mean a damn thing if you can't take care of yourself.
That's
That's
right.
right. That's right.
So Malcolm is one who taught us and who was built for and showed us how to build on that whole question of self-development organizationally and institutionally. The other is the politics of the United Front. Right? Malcolm had been talking about the United Front since the 50s. At all his burgeoning moments of making the Nation of Islam a genuinely national organization. Folks think it started with the message to the grassroots. No, that was a point of acceleration, and it was about to be a point of departure with him on his way out of the Nation of Islam. But he had been, as an organizer, building the Nation of Islam all over the country, using united strategies to establish the nation's place in the community of struggle and in the community of organizations and in the community of the Black radical tradition. Now, folks did not necessarily understand that and appreciate that the way they should have in the nation, but he gave the nation its best look when he did that, right? And he would expand that, of course, as he left the nation, because he had the freedom to do all those things that the nation was scared to do or wasn't ready to do, right? And that is actually to genuinely place our struggle in the larger context of the global revolutionary struggle at that time. Malcolm was the paradigm shifter of the Black radical tradition of the 1960s, 100% without question. Exclamation point, you don't even need to end a sentence.
Absolutely. I appreciate that so much, because there is a lot of talk about what is to be done now. Now, what do we do? And people are being extremely reactionary. And when we think about organizing and what organizing means to movement and that term self-determination, you just said we cannot do anything, and self-determination means nothing if we can't take care of ourselves. So what I'm seeing in some revolutionary spaces is that people are moving from the reactionary themes of let's have a protest, let's have a rally, let's do this, let's do that, to let's get ourselves prepared. Let's talk about what it means to make sure that your community is prepared for an emergency. And if your community is not your physical community, like right around you, then where is your community? Where do you go in case of an emergency? But because we see this heightened level of emboldened violence on the side of the right wing, what do we do if they actually come to our doors? And what do we do if we have to retreat into a place where we really cannot go out there to a grocery store? And as Natasha and I talked about earlier, we need to grow our own food. We need to sustain ourselves and each other without anything that the establishment has to offer. How do we even survive that way? So I am beginning to see people move toward that, because it's a reality that we are living in a time where we could literally have water cut off tomorrow. We see the wildfires in California, right? We see what happened, and we learned that the water system in California is privatized. How do these greedy oligarchs own the water? And how do they decide that they're going to cut it off for some people, but then give it to others? The fact that this is a reality should make us want to lean toward retreating within our ranks so that we can redevelop, so that we can train, so that we can understand what self-determination really means, because it is revolution and not reaction that is going to help us survive.
The holy trinity of Black power, Malcolm gave it to us: self-determination, self-defense, and self-respect. Now, I don't want to overlook self-defense, because the whole question of physical violence is one that's real.
It is.
And so we need to, one of the things that I had to do when I ran the New Black Panther Party in this area is that we actually pioneered on a lot of what became community-based violence intervention, because that's what our community asked us to do. But we were the only ones telling folks, no, don't sell your guns and give them back to the folks who you got them from. No, you keep them. There's going to come a time when we're going to need them, and we're going to need them in a real way. We're going to need y'all to be better with how you handle them. Most of y'all don't even handle them right. You're shooting at each other and you're missing. You're hitting grandma. You're hitting uncles. Y'all over the map. But there'll come a time, and then the 1990s, we had an uprising in St. Petersburg, Florida, that targeted the Uhuru movement, right? And that was a very interesting uprising because here's how it went down for those of y'all not familiar with it. Tyron Glenn, a young man, was killed in his car in a racially profiled, violent incident by the police. And the Uhuru movement had a community-based people's tribunal to put the state on trial, and these officers that did it, they had their pictures all up in the community, armed, extremely dangerous, wanted for murder and all that. Kids vamped in this public meeting. They attacked the meeting, right? But here's the but. Out of to the surprise of many and to the chagrin of the police, they found themselves suddenly under fire from parties unknown to them and unexpected from them. Them same boys in the hood that were banging each other out over bullshit, right? And had a moment where they forced the police to retreat at a time when they were on the verge of really doing some serious harm and damage to some good comrades doing some good work on the question of police brutality. And as we would later see instances like the races that ran into the Charlottesville protests, the attack on the Emmanuel AME Church. We're going to have to protect our spaces again in a very real way from those kind of forces, because those kind of forces think that they are being ennobled and empowered to do and get away with doing what they did. It's no accident, or it shouldn't be a surprise that Trump exonerated all them crackers that stormed the Capitol, right? And so that's a green light.
Yes.
Other
yes.
Green light, sure. And taking Daniel Penny to the what did they take him to? A football? I mean, a soccer game, a baseball game, or something. Taking him out there too. That was also a green light as well.
Absolutely.
Or don't wear the blue uniforms.
That's right.
Here's the thing that I used to tell our kids on the streets. It said, listen, in the 60s, in the early 70s, in Panther time, right? We didn't have the kind of weaponry and the volume of weapons that are on our streets and in our streets and in your hands right now. If we did, some of those battles might have been different. And y'all got weapons. If you're going to use them, there's a time, a place, and a way to do that where you can be genuine difference makers in defending your community. And I can't think of a better way for you to affirm and assert your manhood other than by defending your community from outsiders who would violently try and take us down and destroy our lives and destroy where we live, right? So, so those, Malcolm was very clear. That's one thing about Malcolm. You can be wherever you at in some kind of challenged moment or confused moment, and you come back to Malcolm, you're going to get some clarity.
Absolutely. I definitely agree.
Malcolm will give you clarity. So
I think one of the things that we also need clarity on in this time, as we think about what you are saying, as well as, the idea of how this signals a time for us to retreat into ourselves and regroup and organize and strategize and build our base, is the way in which we've moved away so much from internationalism, not necessarily because we decided to, but because America as the state, you know, as part of the Western colonial empire, understood the importance of those Africans in America being shut off from that internationalist vision and not thinking about our struggle in that kind of way. So tell the people a little bit more about how Malcolm X's internationalism, and why does it matter for us to, one, have internationalism and be connected internationally in that kind of way for our struggle, but also two, what it means, like what it meant back then and also what it means for us today. I hope you heard my question. But let's see, we'll see.
Let's come back to self-determination. Can y'all hear me?
Yeah.
Yes.
I'm having this issue with the damn computer, right? And it's rare that I have it with this one. But let's come back to self-determination in a Pan-African principle and an international lens, right? Because Malcolm did that for us too, right? If the African continent had genuine, full decolonial liberation during that period, as we'd be in a very different position, right? It's no accident that Patrice Lumumba will be taken out at the top of the decade as he comes into power in the Congo. Congo is the richest real estate on the earth that made Europe wealthy and comfortable beyond measure. Those resources had genuinely been in our hands, and they're still not in our hands. Still not in our hands, right? We would the African position globally would be fundamentally different, right? And of course, what do we see right now? We see this attack on the eastern wing of Congo over what? Over those resources, right? And unfortunately, the best troops in Africa right now may be Rwandan forces who do not have a Pan-African orientation. So they have an orientation that is in the back pocket of both the United States and that little country killing a whole lot of people right in front of our face called Israel. They came, their reaction to their genocide was as militarily as backwards as the reaction of the Israelis to their genocide, as they've been exploiting and violating Palestinians since the emergence of this monster colonial state called Israel, doing the bidding of U.S. imperialism at the top of what is indeed the African world. So Malcolm turned us on to all of that. He was the first in the Black radical tradition to genuinely push out for Palestinian self-determination and solidarity. I got knocked off of all these spaces, all these platforms and whatnot, lifting up Malcolm's solidarity on the Palestinian question for almost a year, right? And it hurt our work, to be sure, because we're also a little too dependent on some of these outlets right now. That's something else we got to deal with, right? But Malcolm was way ahead of that. He had a profound love for a then very stable place called Sudan, oldest and blackest real estate, right? Now in the crosshairs of some horrible violence, with 12 million of our people have been displaced and over 1 million killed, and there's no sensible direction as to how that contradiction is going to be resolved anytime soon. Sudan was a place that he loved dearly and deeply because of its historic and its very authentic, the depth of its spirituality. We have an annual gravesite ceremony that we do at Malcolm's gravesite every May 19th, that was conceptualized by Malcolm's big sister, Ella Little Collins, right? And Ella understood Malcolm's love for the Sudan, the spirituality of the Sudan, And so we have this circle of young men in the white that reflects the Muslim spirituality, particular to Sudan, that was very impactful on Malcolm personally when he made those epic sojourns abroad back in 1959, 1964, and a bit into 1965, shortly before his assassination. So, what we're talking about is neocolonialism, right? The world as we know it, the Southern Hemisphere as we know it, has fallen back into what we now call neocolonialism. This is we're concerned about COINTELPRO here that destroyed and interrupted our movement here in this country. Covert Action internationally did the same thing to undermine the radical advance of a non-aligned movement and the revolutionary orientation for a genuine socialist alternative to the capitalist order of the West. We are still trying to recover from that. Now, having said that, there are bright spots, right? Africa is the youngest continent in the world. And we see an emerging, ideological step towards toward a Pan-African orientation coming from our young that has taken place in a very sharp way, politically and militarily, in the Sahel, right? In the land of Thomas Sankara, in the land of Kiyata, and those spaces where, once again, our folks rose up and said, as Malcolm laid out in the message to the grassroots, to hell with France. We want some land, not some France, right? Those are healthy developments that are challenging and older, comfortable, more neo-colonial orientations on the continent that can be an indication of where we should go. And of course, Malcolm also pointed us to the importance of the emergence of China as a powerful non-white international arm and ally that can help the advance on a number of fronts in terms of solidarity in a number of very practical and genuine ways. And that is all in the mix. It's not the China of Mao Zedong that we're talking about, but it is a China that is a definite alternative to any of these racist former colonial countries and to the gangster solidarity of the Russian Federation, right? And I'm saying that guarded because Russia doesn't have the baggage that white supremacy does in Africa, but it's not the Russia of the former Soviet Union that was dedicated to socialist solidarity and socialist development around the world. It's very different time, right? But those young folks represent hope. The young folks that represent this protest movement that is Black, brown, and white, and even Jewish, raising up around the Palestinian question in spite of the advance of the right wing, as a matter of principle, are bright hopes. But this brings us to another thing that we need to be concerned about. We need to be concerned about how those forces can be attacked.
Absolutely.
Prepare for that. And one of the things that's important, you got to be organized. That's one. You got to, build principle coalitions or principles of unity that, you're genuine about and you hold each other accountable to. And you also have to be on your best discipline with your practice.
Baba, you're touching on some things that someone is raising in the chat. And someone is saying that we don't even have things figured out in America to look internationally. So what does solidarity look like if they, meaning comrades in other places, if they can't help us in the home of imperialism?
Well, the folks should understand that oppression is global. It's not just local.
Absolutely.
Solidarity is one of the watchwords of the day, and it has always been when it comes to revolutionary development and making revolutionary change. So yeah, we got problems here that we need to tend to, but the forces that are generating our problems are generating our people's problems in Africa, and what people are hurting under the yoke of neocolonialism and capitalism wherever they are in the world. I'm particularly concerned about what is happening in Gaza, what that could mean for some place like Puerto Rico. Puerto Rico is very close to all of us, right? New York is the most Puerto Rican city in the country, in the world, right? But disaster colonialism, they would love to wipe out as much as that population I can. It can repopulate it with white folks. That's how they get that. That's how settler colonialism.
That's how it gets down. We've seen it. I mean, the history.
Exactly.
You know, and I've been having that conversation with my Puerto Rican comrades about, you know, what solidarity absolutely means between us and them right now, because let us remember that Puerto Rico is a colony of the United States.
That's right.
Realize that. So no, we can't make that mistake of just we're here and they're there. No, we are together resisting oppression, because that's what we need to do, and that's what Malcolm taught us to do.
Yeah, and I would also add on to that sentiment, because I think like in our times there's a lot of conversation when we're talking about having to like rebuild our base and retreat. There's a lot of conversations that we need to have internally as a people, in terms of thinking about how do we move in an internationalist way, given the history of our international solidarity, and also like national solidarity with other groups, but how we've also seen those groups move away from us when they were able to get a chance to move into a certain position. So when we think about Asian, you know, like Asian solidarity at one point, but you know, a lot of that is not what it was before. You know, it has gone, especially when we think about some of these Asians that, you know, have terrorized and killed our people for nothing, you know, within our communities, or even, you know, even when we're talking about Puerto Ricans and, you know, how we do work.
All solidarity is not radical or revolutionary.
Well, yeah, but what my point
all
to this
coalitions aren't this, you know, when you're dealing with bourgeois folks who are basically bourgeois capitalists in their orientation, you're going to get that behavior.
Yeah.
Yes.
When we're organizing on revolutionary principles.
And I think that's one of the things that we need to clear up for the people, right? Because I think that might be one of the things that are telling people like, oh, you know, what's the point of internationalism? What's the point of solidarity? I think some of that history and legacy needs to be acknowledged in terms of that, and also be able to say, like, even with that, how do we strategically still, because yes, that we can't move away from having international solidarity, because like you said, it's an important thing. But I think when we're thinking about what has moved us away from it and what might be making people who, you know, see themselves as Black nationalists want to be internationalists in that way, I think that is also part of the question that I hear people saying, you know, and it's true, it makes sense. And so we have to also let people know, like, okay, like, yes, this is the history, and we acknowledge this is what's happened, and we acknowledge the issues that come up even within solidarity, even within revolutionary solidarity. There's contradictions, and everything doesn't always line up. So we have to be, so how do we, in a time like today, do our strategic type of internationalism that is still very important when we think about, because even America, when people think, if you're going to think you're going to fight imperialism, you're going to think you're going to fight America, that is internationalist within itself. It does not operate in a silo. It operates with its allies in, you know, in other countries, and it makes sure that those who are not its allies are under its foot or under its thumb. So we need to understand that you're not going to fight white supremacy and imperialism and colonialism, you know, just being here in America. That is, you're not going to win that way. That you need the internationalism, but you also have to learn the lessons of what has happened in the past, and then also think about, okay, how do, from those lessons in the current times, do we move in a strategic way where we're opening up ourselves to international alliances in a way that is revolutionary, strategic, and you know, with wide eyes open, right?
Having said that, tomorrow is the 60th anniversary of the assassination, and it's, you know, so there's still a very haunting interruption of our struggle, and something that affects a lot of us deeply who are old enough to just, you know, to have been around in some way in 1965 when we lost him. Now, some of the things that we're doing, however, speak to your question and speak to the broader question. We will be in Harlem at 4 o'clock at the Hotel Teresa, where at the top of the decade that was the 1960s, Malcolm received, right, I'm glad you put the flyer back up. Malcolm received, right, Fidel Castro and the Fidel's delegation, as they were making they were banned basically from any hotel or housing quarters for the September gathering of nations that the United Nations does every year, and this was to have been the first gathering of the Cuban nation after the advance of the claiming of victory of their revolution. This was their first chance to represent them. Malcolm got word that they couldn't get housing down in around Midtown Manhattan. Come on up to Harlem, right? And that would mark the kind of solidarity that we're talking about. That would also mark, where Malcolm would ultimately be required to go and grow politically. Malcolm used the Nation of Islam, and it's the only time, other than perhaps the Million Man March, where the Nation of Islam was used in a coalition building, full mobilizing way outside of the work of getting folks seats in the mosque on a Sunday. Malcolm had those troops in the streets mobilizing the community to support Fidel and the Cuban Revolution, because the Cuban Revolution merited that solidarity. And at the time, all of the, Harlem had an internationalist welcoming committee for situations like that. And Malcolm was the only one willing to step out for Cuba out of those bourgeois Negroes who were part of that. So Malcolm was always the light. He was always the beacon of light. He was always the example out front, showing us how to advance solidarity in a way that it should. And here we are, in a situation where this is one of the most difficult moments by virtue of the continuance of the backwards blockade and strangulation of the Cuban government by the U.S. empire. It's a time when solidarity with Cuba is hugely important to them. They look forward, they appreciate it, they need it, and they deserve it. So I think it's an exemplary moment that we're using a time to gather that can often be quite sorrowful or mourning, because it is the day that marks the anniversary of one of our greatest losses, but to actually advance a particular challenge that's particular to this moment, right? Malcolm is gone, Fidel is gone, Che is gone, and whatnot, but our struggle is still here, and the question of principle, solidarity, and revolutionary development is still the order of the day, So we look forward to that. So we ask folks to join us at the Hotel Teresa. We'll have a press conference and a rally to restate our radical traditions, uncompromising solidarity with the Cuban Revolution. After that, we'll have a Pan-African forum on why Pan-Africanism is important, as Malcolm showed us how to make it important during those days. And back to your earlier question, we should be doing stuff all year round. MXCC is going through a regrouping. We've had some interruptions by virtue of some banking issues. And so we have to go through this whole 501c3 branding, which is really a pain in the behind and that we're really not about, just so we can bank. We intend to resurrect and reclaim our annual Freedom Fighters dinner that we will rename after its conceptualizer, the late Mama Ayalua Ferguson. We're trying to develop a Malcolm X Human Rights Film Festival concept that we will do both in Newark, New Jersey, and in New York City. And we'll be doing more also in Newark with some book signings at the Source of Knowledge bookstore, the only Black bookstore in Newark that is carrying some of the books that we want them to carry that represent the continuity of Malcolm's contribution to our struggle. So all year round. We're hoping to end the year. December 3rd marked the 60th anniversary of Malcolm's profound debate at Oxford University. Black man with an 8th grade education that learned to debate in a Massachusetts prison was spanking some of the most highfalutin experts and British and American experts and white folks at the height of the most prestigious, white institution in the world, spanking their behinds, right? The Oxford debate was legendary. It was a legendary moment for Malcolm. We're trying to get some debate coach legends who do that in the New Jersey and the New York public schools. We're trying to figure out how to end the year with the debate, the development of using Malcolm to establish a local debating tradition, because it's an important tool also for leadership development.
Absolutely.
That we can use, for that. So it's going to be a full year, 100%.
Oh, yeah, I mean, definitely we want to keep the people abreast of all of the different things that are going on. And like Baba Zayid said, there should be stuff going on everywhere, every place, as it relates to the centennial of Malcolm X. But we also know that, we could also add, in terms, people should also be doing things in terms of Patrice Lumumba, as well as Fanon and
the birth anniversaries of Lumumba, of Fanon, and of Medgar Evers. And I'm putting Medgar Evers in that position because Medgar Evers was, a major figure in the bloody South, right? That cost him his life. He wasn't in our space politically or ideologically, but he was a committed freedom fighter that paid the ultimate price for our freedom in one of the most dangerous spaces in this racist North American state. So I include him in that pantheon because he deserves to be in that pantheon. And we're looking at trying to do some of this, which we're hoping we can break ground with the film festival in July to lift up those freedom fighters and their tradition. I should add that December 12th just dropped, and this Sunday they're showing this film called The Soundtrack of a Coup d'etat. It's a new film that merits a look. It's about all of the intrigue and the social covers that were put on to enshroud and to mystify the assassination of Patrice Lumumba. And there's some other good films that we're looking to lift up as well as we move into that period, right? So there's plenty to do, plenty to look forward to. There are plenty of places to go in terms of how to embrace, the so many different pieces of Malcolm's legacy that needs to be appreciated. Earlier, we were talking about, I mentioned the healthy feedback that I'm getting from Latin America and from Europe. It's great stuff. Malcolm's definition of Afro-American was a Pan-American definition. It wasn't, just being a Negro in the United States. Any person of African descent in the Western Hemisphere is an Afro-American, and folks are picking that up in other spaces. And I've seen some organized efforts in spaces coming out of Latin America that are looking to try and build those bridges. And those bridges have been hungry to be built, since those days, because this kind of city, we've had that kind of makeup, and that kind of makeup was the original, stream of membership, in the OAU. So we're looking forward to that.
Thank you so much, Baba Zayid, for all the information and for letting us know what's going on in the streets. Sister Kiana, you wanted to say something before we hop off?
Oh, last Sunday, we're in this space with Baba Zach Kondo, someone who y'all had on that platform. Zach gave us the best treatment of the assassination, right? And he's expanding that in a reprint of that volume by adding some almost 200 pages to his classic treatment. So 3:00 live on YouTube and Facebook, Malcolm X Commemoration Committee page, the Lessons of the Assassination with Baba Zach Kondo. That's our revolutionary fourth Sundays that we will be doing virtually for the entire year.
Thank you so much, Baba Zayid. Cannot say
I'm proud of you.
What a treasure you are. One of the things that I did want to mention is that Baba Zayid is an exemplar of those things that he has learned from Malcolm. Baba Zayid has been a mentor to me since about 2010. Since about 2010, back in the days, Newark Anti-Violence Coalition came to my little town of Roselle, New Jersey, when we had a spree of gun violence that was totally uncharacteristic of our community, to help us begin to organize as a community. And I have been just a student of Baba Zayid. I've been an admirer. I am always, always thankful for the work that you're doing. And thank you for always helping us as organizers understand what our charge is, how we cannot give up in the face of adversity, and how we do have to come back and retreat within ourselves at times so that we can regroup, redevelop, and then go on with the mission. Thank you so much, Baba Zayid.
The ultimate lesson from the ancestors is to never give up, right? And I'm very proud of both of you. Kiana went down to Atlanta and is turning the volume up on them crazy ass Negroes and backwards crackers down there in the defense of the land and defense of the people, and you know, that battle over that madness that they're calling Cop City and giving sanction to. Class struggle is real. The battle between the house Negro and the field Negro is real. Tasha been holding the line for our freedom fighters in a way that, you know, Tasha's a babe. Most of our folks who have been locked up for years and whatnot, she was a baby and whatnot, but she represents the fruit of their efforts and their sacrifices and struggle. So I'm very proud of both of you, and you, I'm at your back, at your service whenever you need me.
Thank you so much, Baba Zayid.
So that was Baba Zayid from the Malcolm X Grassroots Commemoration Committee, and think we enjoyed really having him on the show. There was a lot of good information in terms of Malcolm X and also what's happening in the streets. I also love the conversation that was happening in the chat. We always encourage you uprisers to have conversations in the chat. You know, this is a conversation. This is not, you know, just us talking. You know, we don't know all this stuff. And so, you know, and we need to be able to have these kind of conversations in general. And so I would definitely tell people to organize, you know, like never give up. And also knowing that you can organize locally, but also while organizing locally, think globally. And so what does that mean? It means that while you're organizing, you're not just organizing and thinking about, while you're organizing locally, you're not just organizing and thinking about, okay, what is it that is happening in my immediate area? And, you know, how does that affect maybe, you know, the next community or the next state? But that you're also in that same vein thinking about how is what I'm doing here going to or could trickle into an internationalist position and impact, and how can, you know, things that you're learning here or strategies like Kiana, you know, even within the United States, having been in New Jersey, you know, and organizing there, and then going into Georgia and learning the tips from New Jersey and bringing them there, and people from New Jersey, I'm from Georgia, you know, learning tips from Georgia and bringing them up there. That's also part of what we're talking about. We're talking about internationalism. It doesn't necessarily mean that you have to be, you know, doing this huge, that you got to be going over there, that you got to be doing these huge things, but that even the small things that you do when thinking about how does your local action and how does your local situation connect to the rest of the diaspora and the rest of the world and the rest of the world in terms of geopolitics.
Absolutely. Thanks so much, Natasha, for waking up early this morning.
Thanks, Anna, for waking up early with me.
Yes, with the uprisers, we appreciate you. We thank you for all that you've contributed. Definitely want to keep these conversations going and then continue them each time we come back. Thank you all so much.
All right. Have a good day, everyone. See y'all tomorrow. Rise up.
Uhuru, fam.
Uhuru.
Sometimes the riot is a quiet one. Well, the battle is to love yourself and function in society where voices of reason are muted by anxiety, like gaining notoriety is selling your soul. So we tend to go no deeper than the shallow water level, trying to keep us overhead in the face of all the slurs and the stares. Mentally frozen, paralyzed by fear of failure and success. So we lock, stock, barrel, running while it's crumbling. All these towers and that babbling, but the baby's in the bath and the stash under the bed on my head, spinning from the circles and the puppets and the strings that they pull. Then we move. Reactionary warfare never produces winners on the field. Feeble and foolish. What tools and what weapons are we using? We need some new ones. Real revolution. It's real solutions. Well, we've taken on the ways of the ones who conquer with their guns and religion and division. Got my inner me looking like my enemy. Real revolution. Where my inner me, really a mirror for the galaxy. New time, brand new paradigms, new contracts to sign. They thought that this would all be televised, though it's happening right before our very eyes. It's on the inside, with their guns cocked. When that rock drops, standing on the rooftop, praying that the mountaintop can live inside the valley. People tell me the reward is somewhere off in heaven, like heaven's only in the sky, like chariots are swinging, like God is something separate from yourself, from your wealth, from your lover, from your neighbor. Oh, your savior is coming in your own name, coming with the face the same. Real revolution, it's real solutions, where we've taken on the ways of the ones who conquer with their guns and religion and division. Got my inner me looking like my enemy. Real revolution, where my enemy is really a mirror for the galaxy.